Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Ecoffee with Experts. I'm your host, Matt Fraser. And on today's episode, I have with me a very special guest, John Raslavsky. He'll correct me if I'm wrong. He's the founder and CEO of Johnny on the Spot Web Design, a web design and digital marketing agency headquartered in Gilbert, Arizona. He has spent the last 10 years helping clients with web design, SEO, social media marketing, and advanced reputation management. When not spending time designing websites and marketing campaigns, he enjoys playing golf, playing basketball, hiking, and spending time with his family. John, thank you so much. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you here. So, John, I noticed on your website that you talk about like building websites that convert and get 5x leads than your competition or something like that. I mean, I don't want you to quote me, but the fact of the matter is that, talking about conversions and conversions tips and strategies, like CRO tips and strategies that will skyrocket your conversions. That's the name of our episode today. And so I guess I want to talk to you about that. Like, what's your thoughts on the best way to approach conversion rate optimization?
Oh, man, there's so many different strategies that you can implement. Most clients, I will find a client or I'll have clients come to me and say, we've got this website. We want to make money on it, but it's not doing anything. I get a lot of contractors, or I get, brick and mortar or retail or WooCommerce sites that come to me. They're like, we're not seeing as much traffic, or our traffic has dropped off, or, everybody's a little different, it seems like.
Yeah.
So everybody needs a different strategy, and a fully customized strategy is usually what we come up with for our clients. There's not one, magical
one size fits all.
Yeah, no one size fits all. No magic bullet, if you will. I'm not sure if that's the right phrase, but yes, exactly.
Is there a first step that you take? Like, let's tie this down to something specific, like a renovation website. You have a home renovator contractor, if you will.
Yep.
Excuse me. And what would be your first step in the conversion rate optimization process that you go through with them?
The first thing I do is I look at what they're doing, their base, like the baseline, right? Is what we call it. So the baseline is like for Google My Business listing, where they're listed online. So I'll go on to like SEMrush. I'll go out, I'll do a full search online to see where they are, what those things are, and lay eyes to most of those things. Because I find that a lot of times that a client will have like the wrong phone number on a site, or they're not listing all of their information on their Google My Business listing. My baseline and what I found over the years is what Google really loves when it comes down to just, off page conversion rate is like, how many phone calls are we getting on Google? Where are we listed on Google? Like if I even if I can mask my IP, right? Or if I can take my IP and I put it longitudinally and latitudinally in like a different city or something, I'll go and drop that into my Chrome browser and go, okay, let's, home renovation companies near me, right? Is like the near me is always the tag I use when I'm looking at any company, right?
Yeah.
I had a local company. Yeah. I had a local company that was a pallet company that, there are not a lot of them out there, but he's kind of like in the Southeast Valley here in Arizona, which is a little less metropolitan, a little more suburban. So I'll start there, right? I'll do the baseline and just all the touch points, right? Of where is this person and where are they losing business on the front line, and just to kind of, that's my first step, right? The baseline of, hey, where is this coming in? Is this not working, right? And then if I find a problem there, then I, write that down, go back to the client with that. And then I go to the next thing and I go, okay, what are we doing for social media? What are we doing for marketing? Are we doing any online advertising? Are we doing any periodical advertising? Like, where else are we advertising and where else are we trying to reach? Where's our outreach, right? What's really happening there? Are we running Facebook ads? Those sorts of things. That's my baseline.
Yeah. What about on the website itself, though, John? For instance, do you take a look at like what are the conversion points on the site? Like, for instance, maybe they have a free quote form, and looking at what the conversion rate on that particular form is, and seeing, do you take a look at that and see what their conversion rate is for those forms? And if it's like abysmal or not?
Yeah, so that's basically the second thing I do is I go through their website, right? So I start with one, move on to the next, right? Because you got to move through everything to make sure, like if we don't have all the right sources coming in, we can't convert. We don't have a central point we can bring it to, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you're troubleshooting anything electrical, right? You usually start from the switch and you work your way back to the box, right? If you're working on like your house, right? So in my brain, and that's what my head was. My dad was an electrical engineer and he built stuff for NASA and stuff that went into space. And so over the years, he taught me all sorts of really cool things. And honestly, troubleshooting is one of the things I do best in this world. And so for me, that's why I love working on websites. I love it when that's kind of why I like working on websites and finding issues on stuff. So I start from one point, work my way backwards. So on the website, when it comes down to a form, right, I'll go on the form and I'll test it. Right. Yeah. And then I'll go to another browser and I'll go, okay, is this working across everything? And depending on the ecosystem that the form is. So let's say like it's an HTML form coming out of like Keep, or let's say it's something coming out of HubSpot, or it's coming out of another CRM, let's say. I'll look at the data that's coming in, and then I'll physically test it across to see if it's actually working. And then I'll start there, and then I'll look at, what are we advertising? What is it? Is this, is there value here? Or are we just throwing up just any old pop-up just to have a pop-up, right?
Yeah.
Because even though in this world of pop-ups, we all hate the pop-up, but it's very effective. I have to explain that to my clients. They're always
it is.
I had a client I launched a site on a week and a half ago, and I'm like, dude, like you got to remember, everyone hates the pop-up, but it works. Like with the right marketing, with the right, you're trying to build your list and you're trying to get your touch points with your clients and your customers. If it's not the right offer, if it's not the right way to get people to engage with you, it doesn't work, right? So
I read of just to add something of value. I read watched a video about a company that integrated a pop-up at the checkout point because the abandonment rate was high. So they integrated a pop-up to ask them why they didn't purchase. And the company was a men's clothing company, and they thought that people weren't purchasing because of the price, but it wasn't because of the price, because they were unsure about the sizing. And then they even looked and saw on the mobile phone that the checkout button dropped off. It was below the fold. So they did that. But if they had not had that pop-up, and people actually replied to the pop-up about why they didn't buy. They didn't just close the pop-up. They added and replied, and they found out why. It wasn't because of the bias that the company owners came to, that the pricing was wrong. It's because they were unsure about the sizing. So they put in a sizing chart on the single product pages and made content talking about how they come up with the sizing and different things on the product pages. And
I heard that one before.
Yeah. So anyway,
if you ask the right questions, you get the right answers, right? And
absolutely.
That's something somebody told me a long time ago. It's like, make sure you ask the right questions, because if you don't ask the right questions, you won't get the right answers.
Yeah, that's so true. So you were talking about on page, and I didn't mean to cut you off in regards to Keep and forms and testing and taking a look at those things and making sure that they work and that they work in the first place. Are there any things that you use to determine what to test? Like, how do you decide what to test on the page is what I'm trying to ask. I mean, I know conversion points are probably one thing. I mean, you can test like different button colors and so on and so forth.
You can add different analytics. There's a bunch of different products out there. There's not one go-to. What ends up happening a lot of times is I'll end up having a client that we'll have something in place that they're currently using, or they want to use, and then we'll take that and we'll add some type of JavaScript to it to track the form, to see if they're just they're just Xing out of it, they're Xing out away from it, why they're interacting with it. A lot of times I'll use Hotjar on a site. And Hotjar is just a heat map on the page. It'll wherever the mouse stays the longest, or there's a click, it will register that on there, which is a really effective way of doing it. Also we'll do A/B testing. We'll look at, because design matters on some level. because colors, when traditionally with marketing, right? If you go back to the early days of when people were doing advertisement in magazines and original print, everyone said like yellow was something that was very soothing, right? And you want to use certain colors which don't always match up with branding. So then you got to kind of make sure the form and the way that the page is set up and the way the things interact actually makes sense, that make people want to click the button, right? I mean, the days of just plain Jane pages of web forms are kind of gone. If it's not something that's engaging the person that makes them feel like they're getting something or they want to click that button, there's no way to, so people aren't going to touch it, from a color standpoint, from a feel standpoint, obviously from a grammatical standpoint as well, because not everybody in this day and age, everybody's worried about the information getting tracked. Everybody's worried about where their email address is going. They're worried they're going to get pulled off on some lists. So it's kind of to give somebody warm and fuzzy, to make them actually want to be on that page, to share that information, to have that interaction is so critical, And like you're talking about, on that other website, people worry about sizes. People worry about the little things in this day and age because there's so many things online, and there's some things that people don't even think about,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You mentioned split testing. I mean, Hotjar is one tool to measure the what people are doing on your site. But are there any split testing tools that platforms that you have found to be better than others? Like what's your favorite?
It depends. Okay. I don't have one go-to. We use Elementor Pro a lot. You can do A/B testing through there.
Just wait a minute. I'm not familiar. I'm a Beaver builder, so
that's right. We talked about this before.
We talked about that off camera. Yeah. So Elementor Pro, you can actually do split testing.
You can do split testing with Elementor Pro. You can actually go in there, and there's integrations and like all kinds of great stuff you can use. Just you can set it up to go. This is A, this is B, and there's even some you can do more than just A, B. You can do add a C too. So it kind of just depends. There's not like one go-to tool. And sometimes I'll inherit a site from a client that is like, this is built in just pure WordPress, and this is the theme that we use. And so now I've got to look at a like pop-up maker, and then sometimes you have to upgrade the license. So sometimes you kind of have to figure out the right tools. So like if I build a site of my own, I mean, I'd love to go through Elementor Pro and then add whatever into it makes it make sense. And so, it kind of depends. And it depends on the metrics of what people are comfortable with. Some clients really are like, want to see the raw data. Like I want to see the raw data, but some clients like, you have to set up reporting. So like SEMrush has great integrations that you can pull in for, clicks and all that sort of stuff. Google Analytics, tagging Google Analytics is fantastic. I know they're upgrading a lot of that next year. Yeah.
Do you use in conjunction with Google Analytics, like event tracking through Google Tag Manager to like measure the conversions?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Do you find
it's a very detailed setup, but yeah.
So for instance, like when you integrate like something like Keep or a third-party form, is it, I'm just going to pretend I'm stupid here, because a third-party form though, usually how do you track the event? How do you track a third-party form conversion when it's not an actual part of the site? Like I found that like, for instance, some people use Gravity Forms and then connect that with Keep in order to use the Gravity Form to send them to a thank you page on the site. So is that one way to go about it, or is there event tracking through Google?
That's probably the easiest way to do it, honestly. Like I think
the first way I mentioned,
Gravity Forms is one of the easiest ways to do it, because when you're using an HTML form, you have to add an additional tracking code into the form itself.
Yeah.
Right. And not break the page on top of what you're doing. Right? So for anybody who's setting it up, like somebody who's an intermediate to beginner user, I would say take the Gravity Forms. There's a really, really good plugin for Keep that you can add it to Gravity Forms. It's an add-on, and then it does an API call straight to Keep. Like I've done that integration for a couple of sites, and then you can add the tracking code in there for the clicks and everything else, which is great. And in Gravity Forms, I like a little bit more. It's a little bit, it's easier to use because it's more drag and drop than like Contact Form 7 or one of those that traditionally use a little more code based integration. So it's probably the easiest way to do it.
So it's better to have first party data than third party data is what I'm trying to say. That if people want to get a real good idea of their conversions, they should try to have integration like directly on their site rather than having to implement JavaScript and all these other things. Try and make a central point. Ground zero is what I'm trying to say. Your website should be ground zero.
Yeah. And sometimes that's hard. Sometimes people just want to see it all in the CRM, or they want to see it on Google because they're like, I trust Google, but I don't trust my CRM. It just kind of depends on the end user. Me, I can look at the data in a bunch of different places and still pick it apart because I know the base, I'm looking at, clicks, I'm looking at traffic, I'm looking at where the traffic's dropping off on the site. Like there's a lot of data to take in, and you kind of, it's all pseudo, I'm going to say pseudo quotes, pseudo universal, because you're looking, when you go from platform to platform, right? The metrics are similar. Sometimes you have to look up the exact way that they're calculating things, but for the most part, you know what you're looking at when it comes to your conversion rate.
Yeah, with your clients that you've worked with, have you seen some common themes in regards to mistakes that people make when their websites are set up in regards to when it comes to conversion rate optimization?
I'll tell you what, the biggest thing is they don't test it, or they don't test it right.
Oh,
or the thing that I found over the years is you have to test it at least 3 to 4 times. Because what happens a lot of times, someone will they'll test it once, they'll get an initial response, right? And then they'll walk away from it, and then something changes, whether it's server side or they go into something else on the site, and then all of a sudden it changes something, right? And then their ultimate end goal for what they're trying to do, they're not making sure that it's happening, right? I had a site, really high traffic site, that we relaunched last year, and when we relaunched it, the Google Tag Manager wasn't set up properly on the site. And so we weren't getting real-time analytics out of the gate. And so we had to go back and test it through and make sure we were getting all the data through all the analytics coming through the site. So test it. We thought it was working. We first set it up. And it was actually tracking off of their old site, not off of their new site.
Interesting. So they had to make sure to implement that tracking properly in order to do that.
Very easy.
So
very easy. Yeah.
What's the minimal amount of sessions that a business should look for, or a website owner should, in order to get enough data?
Depends on the site. Because you're not everybody's traffic's built the same, right? You've got, for a WooCommerce site versus an informational site, right? An informational site, if you're driving traffic to it and you're getting, a couple hundred users a day, and you're going to find a drop off here and there, if it's, I try to look at it as percentages, right? If you're getting a drop off of like point something and you have thousands of pieces of traffic, still look at it, right? And if you're looking at a site that is only getting 20 to 30 pieces of traffic a day and it drops to nothing, then you're not getting clicks, you're not getting conversions, you're not getting purchases. Look at that, right? Because you kind of get a baseline and a feel for what's happening with the site. Because when you relaunch a site, you're not going to have the same amount of traffic, because then you have to track it, right? And when you're tracking traffic from day 1 to day 60, let's say, day 60 is when you're going to get, or day 30 or even day 60 is when you're going to get your best numbers, your truest numbers, because people are relearning your site, or they're acclimating, so to speak. And it's not like when you're driving on a road, right? And then they put it, and all of a sudden they put in a roundabout. Okay. So you go in a roundabout, you got to know where to get off in the roundabout. Right? Yeah. With the new site, it's the same thing. I've been purchasing from this e-commerce site forever. Well, all of a sudden they don't have like men's and women's on, in the landing page in a place where I can find it easily. They've gone to something that's more graphically versus verbally. And it's like, now I've got to find out where to go. And then you have to see if that actually makes sense, from a conversion standpoint.
Do you think it's important to track user behavior in order to see those things that are going on?
100%.
Yeah.
You can't, in my opinion, you can't just look at numbers. You can't just say, okay, I've got X amount of traffic, X amount of checkouts. You've got to go, okay, maybe we can save a step. Maybe we can get more people to buy if we do like a one-page cart versus a multi-page cart checkout, right? Or you can do, there's different ways. So if you're tracking the user and what they're actually doing, and you know what they're doing, if you're like, God, is there a way to make this easier on them, right? Because the train of thought and what I've always been told is to get the person from the second they hit the site to whatever it is you're trying to get them to accomplish, right? So let's say we're talking like a WooCommerce site. From the second they see something to where they buy it, right? Which is why a lot of marketers went from direct email marketing and targeted marketing, redirected marketing and emails to get them to click on one thing and go straight over to the product from an email, right? Which is one of the greatest things marketers ever did. Kind of frustrates us all at some point because we're getting flooded with emails, but it's one of the most effective ways. So to get them from point A to point B is the key. To track, and that's why I think it's so important.
So here I'm hearing you say something which I think most people overlook, and I want to point it out, and it's the customer journey. I mean, in regards to CRO optimization, businesses need to map out or pay someone or invest in something in order to map out that customer journey, because the customer journey may not be as simple as email to buy cart. So in other words, mapping out where those conversion points are. For instance, with a renovation company, maybe they have a lead magnet, and the lead magnet's like a hiring guide, and they have converted, or maybe they're going to implement a hiring guide or something. But the ultimate goal is to get either a free consultation, interior design renovation consultation, or a quote using the quote tool. So there could be multiple points of conversion in regards to taking them from the top of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel. Obviously, the top of the funnel being informational content, a blog post that then leads them into a blog post that leads them into a lead magnet. Like the blog post could be 7 mistakes to avoid before renovating your kitchen. I'm just making this all up, by the way. And then the lead magnet could be 7 mistakes to avoid before hiring a kitchen renovation contractor. And then it could be, get a free kitchen renovation consultation and then a kitchen renovation quote. And if you don't know what those things are of what you want to achieve, it's kind of hard to measure what you don't know. Exactly. And that's what I'm trying to say, that you've talked about some things that have just made me trigger that it's one of the most important things is knowing what the journey is. You talked about having the goal in mind and the end goal. The end goal obviously is to make money. That's what everybody wants to do. And tying those things in, and we could talk about that. But knowing what the customer journey is, like, that's probably pretty important, isn't it?
Oh, it's huge. It's everything. I mean, if you don't know what your end result is, you don't have a journey. If you can't, my dad always used to say this. He always used to say, if you can't write your plan or what you're trying to do on a piece of paper, you have no business doing it.
Yeah.
Because if you can't track that, I've had clients that are all over. It's like, no, we're really trying to do this. No, we're really trying to do that. But you don't understand our point. And it was like, hold on. I'm like, we need to make this as simple and straightforward as possible. Because if you don't know what the end result is, like I've had 2-hour, conversations with people where I've sat down and said, okay, what are you trying to do? And I just sit there and I just take notes. I just said, what do you want your site to do? What do we want to do in 6 months, 8 months, a year? Like what do you want to see happen here digitally for you?
Yeah.
And we want more business. Well, why do you want more business? What's your website doing? And I just say why. They get tired of me saying why. Like, stop saying why. And I'm just like,
ask why.
Yeah. The why is always the big one,
Oh gosh.
It's crazy.
I was talking to a marketer yesterday that had worked with Bose, and she always asks why. She practices the principle of asking why 5 times. I don't know if that's a philosophy or something, but can you share an example of a data-driven experiment you run to improve conversion rates on a website? Like a story?
I do. Yeah. I actually, I've had clients where but like what I like to do is I like to look at what they think is working with the client. So it's more of a customer journey, and I'll kind of bring this around in two different ways. Okay.
Sure.
So there's the customer journey, right? And then there's the like the client, if you will. And then there's right the customer, right, that's buying from them. Right. Yeah. So what I tend to do is I will set up Hotjar on the site first. Okay. Right. It's just beautiful to watch how people think, right? So Absolutely. and usually what I'll do with the client, I'll play a game with them. I'll say, okay, I'll take a screenshot. I'll say, okay, where do you think that people are currently clicking on your site? Where do you think people are going with this, right? And the client and I will do that first. And usually it's interesting to see. There's only been a handful that really knew what their customer was doing, and it's funny because you sit there and you try to guess what people do, and then sometimes you're slightly right, and sometimes you're totally wrong. You know, we were finding that one time it was a pop-up. It was an insurance company that was trying to capture email addresses so that they could market to those people, right? They were trying to gather email addresses so that they could go, okay, how do we go out and market to them? How do we have a group of people that we don't really know, that we kind of know, that we have permission to send information, that want to hear about things that we're working on or ways that we can help them with their business or their home, right? So what we're finding was they were just clicking past it initially, right? And we made it a little harder. So we said, okay, well, let's make it harder for them because it was too sensitive of a click, right?
Okay.
For them to, so you had like a screen, if you will. So like the screen I'm in now, right? So we had the entire thing taking over the page, and it was this nice little pop-up, and it said, would you like to hear, would you like to hear about more information and offers that our clients, we provide to our clients? And it said, enter your email address here, and then submit. So, and it was a dark background. We're like, okay, this could work. And we had a few come through here and there. And then what we were finding, we did Hotjar, we were finding people were clicking outside of it, here and there, and they weren't actually hitting the X. And so I tried to set up an experiment to go, okay, where is this person going and why, right? Because then you got to think of, okay, the end result is we want this email address right here instead of somebody clicking out and just going and finding information, or why. How do we entice them more? So we made it a little bit harder for them to click, right? We hid the X outside of the box, right? Made it a little bit darker, but you can still see it. And we're finding was people were more, and it kind of is a crummy way of doing it. I know it doesn't give me warm and fuzzies to say this as a marketer, but they started filling it out, and they hit X and they went to the next page. It was kind of this mental thing. And on mobile too was the same way. And so I try to test it across all platforms to see what's working, what's not working, right? And tell the client, okay, you got to invest money in this to make this work. Yeah. So then we I said, the client and I both were like, this is not the greatest. Let's change up what we're offering here. And so we ended up saying, join our, monthly email list, our clients get a lot of value out of this or whatever. I can't remember exactly what we said off the top of my head, but we changed the wording after that. And then it went up even more and even more. So, you're only going to get a certain amount of people being able to do certain things, right? So you can only affect things in a certain way. But my go-to, my base is testing something that makes sense, or try two different pop-ups that show up that you're giving information on for people to move through.
Is there a framework or a process that you either use or have developed as a result over the years you've been doing this that you found to be effective? I mean, you don't have to go into exact details. Kind
of. We touched on it a little bit earlier.
Off camera, we touched on a little bit.
So, the first things we do is, it's not like a quote unquote like traditional way of doing it. A lot of people will say, I've got this process or this. We've kind of developed it over the years of just looking at like all the baselines of everything, right? Yeah. We run all the reports. We go into SEMrush, we run the reports. Who's on there? Who's actually showing up on the site? Are we getting the right analytics for what we're trying to show, right? And then we go into, what's our Google My Business doing? Are we getting reviews? What kind of traction are we getting? what are we doing outside of this? You know, are we doing YouTube videos? Are we doing social media stuff? You're like, what is driving traffic, and is it effective? Right. So it's that troubleshooting, starting from the switch back to the box. If we don't,
absolutely,
that's the only way I could say it, because not everybody's built the same, right? I mean, we all have the same basic tools, right? For if you've got a retail business like a brick and mortar, you're always going to have, you know, your Google My Business listing, you're going to have your social media, your Instagrams, whatever. You're going to have all those things out there, but you gotta take all that in. This is where we are. This is everything we've got going on out there, and let's look at each piece, right?
Yeah.
And what pieces are we missing? You know, I had a client that wasn't gathering reviews on Google, and we found one of the tricks to kind of conversion is those reviews, right? If you don't have good reviews out there, people aren't going to find you trustworthy, and they have to be current reviews. They can't be 2 years old, right? So when we're going from, you know, having like the one thing I tell people is, if you have like a third party, right? Like some of our contractors that we work with have like House Call Pro or one of those. They have an external site, right? That actually has really good value, right? They have a good domain value. They have a higher ranking domain because they're not spammy. They're supplying good information, right? So when you have a third-party site like that that's tracking reviews, that's bringing in reviews for you, that's pushing your reviews a lot of times over into Google that are mostly 4 and 5 star reviews, or mostly 5-star reviews, which is a really good way of doing that, right? So you're getting this additional kick, as I call it, right? So for some reason, the magic equation, if anybody's listening to this that is looking for a way to really kick their business, get that third-party review going. If you have a third party, right? There's To Your Success, there's Get Reviews, there's all kinds of stuff out there.
So getting reviews and using some means of getting reviews, if you're a local business, is going to be high in regards to and then, you know, that's the customer journey. People come to your site, they find out who you are as a brand, they're going to go check out if you're legitimate or not. And if you see like tons of 2-3 star, or out of 10, 2-3, well, whatever. If you see crappy reviews, you're going to eliminate them off your list.
Exactly.
But if you see lots of 5-star reviews and maybe 1 3-star and maybe 1 1-star, but it's how you reply to it. I mean, not everybody's perfect, and there are some crummy customers out there. That would be, you know, significant to do that. And I guess, like you said, it all comes back to the customer journey. And then implement it. Like, you probably go into Google Analytics and see what pages are getting traffic, and then saying, okay, well, what are the conversions? And let's just stick to a contractor. The conversions are phone calls, web forms. If you have the money to pay someone to do chat sessions for you, which I've heard is a valid way to, you know, get customers, even if it's an automated chat. But, you know, there's certain conversion points. And you got to know what those are first, and then map, and then you have to be able to track those. With either, you know, goal setting. So I guess finding out what the goals and event tracking are in the site. So if someone comes and says, I'm just talking here about what you've said, someone comes as a contractor, you got to figure out, okay, Mr. Customer, you got this customer journey, but we need to be able to measure first what it is that's happening, because you can't improve what isn't measured. So measuring those things out, I guess, right? Of measuring it and deciding on, you know. And so, case in point, you talked about a contractor phone calls. I mean, I bet you there's a lot of people that don't use phone tracking, call tracking.
That's right. They don't.
That's incredible. That's just incredible. That they're not doing it. Like, today's day and age is mind-boggling.
Well, and it's so easy these days to do it. Like most people are like, I'm like, well, where are you tracking your calls? Where your man calls? How do you track that? Well, I don't. It just comes in off my cell phone. Okay.
That's retarded.
Well, what if we use Twilio, or we use, Google, Google My Business Line or something? Like, let's find another tool to track those, because if somebody clicks, you can't. Like, if you don't know what's going on, how much you're actually losing. If you don't know, you're spending money and you're leaving money on the table. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, you can't improve what can't be measured. And the number one thing you should probably be measuring is, for a small business anyway, or any business that's takes phone calls, and we're just tracking. I guess I'm tying this back into some of the things you've talked about measurement, like a goal, establishing the goals of the website. Phone calls is a goal. Maybe chat sessions is a goal. Maybe web forms is a goal. You know, like for instance, I made mention to you that I worked as a marketing director of a car dealership. I mean, I implemented call tracking and integrating it into the CRM and integrating the calls event tracking into Google Analytics and having those things all talk together so that, and recording the phone calls so that we could find out, well, what's happening? What are they saying on the phone? And my God, that was insightful. You know? Oh yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't go there. But
back
anyway.
in the day, I worked in property management years ago. And one of the things that I always found was fascinating is when they would come to shop us and they would record the call and you could hear yourself on the call. And it was always in like one of the initial trainings where you'd have trainings a couple times a year. And it was part of your bonus. And they were like, okay, you did great on this call. You didn't do this. You didn't do this. You didn't do this. And why didn't you try to set the appointment? You know, there's so much that can come out training wise from those calls.
Oh, absolutely. For sure.
Huge. So
for
huge.
sure. Oh, yeah. That's one thing, Danny. Go ahead.
Even lead follow-up. I mean, when you're talking about CRMs, right? I mean, you paid all this money, you have all this energy, all this automation to convert. When you're converting, why aren't you following up? Why?
Yeah, absolutely.
I always try to tell people, get somebody on the phone as quick as possible because
absolutely.
There are those people that do want to email back and forth. There are those people who do want a text message. You know, like those people are out there, but the gross majority of people want their information like they want everything fast these days. You've got cell phones, the internet so quickly that if you don't talk to somebody, if you don't get somebody on the phone quick and you don't set an appointment and you don't find a way to you know, put them in touch with whatever they're looking for, they're not going to get it. You know, and that's one of the biggest things I see with like offices, like calls come in, but then they don't get connected. Like the biggest thing I see right now, honestly, is doctors' offices. They have all these automations for phones, but there's people are so busy. They need like one person just to call and follow up, in my opinion.
And answer the phones. Yeah. The phone is a marketing channel now. It is a marketing channel and should be treated. It should be treated as such with ROI being tied down to the phone.
Big time.
You know,
big time.
It's especially for businesses that it's strategic, like every missed call. I mean, how much money? So if you're not tracking it, then you have no idea how to improve it.
Exactly.
And you have no idea how much money you're losing. It's
exactly.
Yeah. I've run into business owners that one business owner, he just wanted to use it. Well, I don't need it anymore. We're too busy. We're so busy. We don't even. It's like, well, then maybe you should hire more people. Like, I don't know. Like, how can you be so busy that you don't care anymore? It just doesn't compute to me. It's just, and especially since the cost, I mean, let's be frank, the cost of phone call tracking isn't really that expensive. I mean,
it's gotten so cheap in the last few years.
Yeah. The technology has made it, you know, so inexpensive. But so anyway, I guess, you know, not to go down too much rabbit hole, but talking about, you know, being able to track stuff. You got to be able to track the events and the goals and determine what the goals and events are on the site in order to track them. Is there a story you can tell me where like you made one change and it resulted, like a specific story and it resulted in like this, like, but I guess you talked about that form there. How much of an increase? I guess we already talked about that. How much of an increase that resulted in the amount of lead forms?
33%. 33% increase. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Didn't feel good at the time, but it was like, oh, boom. Yeah. Boom. Like jumped up. One of my first clients that I was working with many years ago, he was not on Google My Business. And what I find a lot, and I know I've reverted back to it a lot, but it's so quintessential for business owners these days. You know, a lot of people
brick and mortar,
not brick and mortar, just almost anybody who has a phone number that you're calling into, right? That is like
Google My
medium
Business
to small size business, right?
Yeah.
And so for people to not be set up correctly, like I had, you know, and to grow that, right? Because you know, it's kind of corny, but you know, have you seen the movie The Interns with Vince Vaughn?
No, I haven't. I should watch it.
So it's kind of funny because it's all about, two older guys going to work to Google as interns. So
yeah,
in this movie, they talk about like they're trying to sell to the guy, and he's got a small pizza business, and they're trying to help him grow, and they see the potential, and it's like, okay, the potential is there, right? But what's funny is with Google, right, your local brick and mortar, your local business can grow so much more, right? Because when you start out, the first second you list it, okay, let's say you have roughly 3 to 4 mile radius, maybe a little bit more, depending on how much is in your area, right? How many people are in your industry, right, that are in proximity, okay?
Yeah.
And then you can grow that proximity into other neighborhoods depending on how busy you are and how much business that's getting driven, right? You don't have to be an ad on there to get business. If you're doing all the things that make sense, that cyclical way of getting reviews, having an offsite reviews, putting those reviews on your website, optimizing your website for speed and performance. Like there's all these little tiny, metadata and everything you put on a site to make it and try to hit all the things that Google wants, right? That will grow. Like your listing will grow. So when you get on Google and you're searching for a business, certain ones, like if you're searching a larger geographical area, let's say like in a larger city, when you go to do that search, you'll see certain pins and certain businesses pop up. It's not the ones that have, let's say, 100 reviews. It's the ones that are getting traffic to their website. It's ones that are getting the reviews. It's the ones that are getting the calls off the reviews, right? So they're marketing themselves in a way that Google's like, hey, we're going to reward you. We're going to make your area bigger.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not just like somebody who's paying a ton of money to Google, although Google loves that, right? And there's over 300 and something points that we don't know about that Google likes from an SEO perspective that help us, help a website do well and rank because, so
the algorithm is immense.
Yeah, the algorithm is amazing. Like, if I'm sure someday, many years from now, we may not even be around anymore, but we'll know what the actual algorithm is, and that will be
maybe one day. No, you made me think because I was the marketing director. I alluded to this. I was the marketing director of a car dealership, and if we had not implemented the measurement to test this, and it made me think because you talked about Google My Business, we started using call tracking on. We started using call tracking numbers for our numbers on Google My Business, a specific number just for Google My Business. It was only for Google My Business on that.
Right.
And then we also use a UTM parameter to track the website traffic. And we also started using some of the things you talked about, review software.
Yep.
And the correlation, the more reviews the dealership got, the more traffic they got, and the more vehicles they sold. It was absolutely astounding.
Yes.
And it blew my mind away. And yet they didn't want to spend the money on review software. But they just wanted to manually get people to do reviews and not have a process.
Right.
And the software creates a process. Because when you tie it into your CRM, you can use marketing automation to trigger.
Big time.
Human beings, especially I found salespeople, they want to do as little as possible and make as much money as possible.
Exactly.
So they don't care. They don't. And if you tie reviews though to their performance bonus or performance, whatever, you have to tie everything to money to make people care. But the point I'm trying to make is that, all these things you're talking about are key to like increasing CRO and getting more traffic and more phone calls, more leads, more business. It's just more and phone call tracking and the customer journey and all those things. Hey, what do you think what do you think is one big takeaway you'd like people to get from this episode?
Don't underestimate the simple things you can do right now to help your business grow.
Yeah.
And make sure you're tracking every step of what you're doing and you're actually looking at the numbers. Because if you don't know where you started and you don't know where you are today and you don't know any of the information, you don't know where the journey is taking you, and you don't have an end goal, that's the biggest thing that you can do for your day-to-day business, whether it's calls, leads, emails, whatever that analytic is for whatever industry you're in, It's so important to track all that information, because if you don't track it, and if you don't know what it is, you don't know what your return on your investment is going to be. You don't know what your return on anything is going to be, really, because then, make sure you're taking the time to look at those things, because it's very easy to get caught up in the minutia of your day and to not look at those things that are so important to help you grow.
Absolutely. Hey, John, how can our listeners connect with you online?
Couple ways, actually. You can contact us through our website, johnnyonthespotwebdesigns.com.
Okay.
You can call us. You can call direct. I can actually give my cell if we want to give that.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Well, what about you on LinkedIn, though, right?
Yep, I'm on LinkedIn, John Raslavsky or Johnny on the Spot. Or you can
on Twitter?
Email me at. I don't have a Twitter handle for my business yet. I do my personal, John Raslavsky, if you want to.
If you're on Twitter.
Why not? Yeah, John Raslavsky. It's probably the only one out there. Or you can email me at john@jotsweb.com.
Cool. Hey, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure having you here.
My pleasure, man. It's been great being here.
Right on. Have a great day.
You too, buddy.